What happens when Hollywood royalty sits down for what should be a simple interview and the host decides to cross every line imaginable? In just 25 seconds of one comment, Seth Meyers turned a pleasant conversation into the most shocking exit in late-night television history. Samuel L. Jackson walked onto that stage like he always does, confident, calm, ready to talk about his latest project. The audience was cheering. The energy was high. Everything seemed normal. But what nobody in that studio could have predicted was how quickly things were about to fall apart. Seth opened with the usual pleasantries, small talk about the weather, a few laughs from the crowd. Samuel was relaxed in his chair, smiling, nodding along. He was there to promote his new film, a passion project he had been working on for years. The kind of movie that meant something to him, not just another paycheck. This was personal. "So, Samuel," Seth said, leaning back in his chair with that casual, confidence talk show hosts always have. "Tell us about this new movie. What made you want to do this one?" Samuel's face lit up. You could see it. This was what he came here for, to share something he cared about. "Well, Seth, this film is really special to me," Samuel began. "It's about second chances, about redemption. It's about a man who made mistakes and is trying to make things right. I connected with that story on a deep level." The audience was listening, really listening. Samuel had that gift. When he talked, people paid attention. He went on for a bit, explaining the character, the director's vision, the message they were trying to send. Seth was nodding, but there was something in his expression, something off, like he was waiting for his moment to jump in. And jump in he did. That's great, Seth interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. "But let's be honest here, Samuel. You've done what? Like 100 movies at this point. How many of them are actually good?" The studio went quiet. Not the good kind of quiet, the uncomfortable kind. The kind where everyone knows something just went wrong, but nobody knows how to react yet. Samuel's smile faded. Just a little, but enough that you could see it. "I'm sorry, what?" Samuel asked. His voice was still calm, but there was an edge to it now. Seth laughed. That nervous laugh hosts do when they think they're being clever, but aren't sure if the joke landed. "Come on, you know what I mean," Seth continued. "You're in everything. Marvel movies, Star Wars, indie films, big budget action stuff. At some point, it's just about the money, right? Not every role can be meaningful." Samuel sat up a bit straighter in his chair. The audience was dead silent now. You could feel the tension building. This wasn't playful banter anymore. This was something else. "Seth," Samuel said slowly, carefully, "I choose every role I take for a reason, whether it's a big franchise or a small. Independent film, I don't just show up for a paycheck. I'm an actor. This is my craft." Seth shrugged. Actually shrugged, like what Samuel just said didn't matter. Sure, Seth said. "But come on. You can't tell me you read the script for every Marvel movie and thought, wow, this is going to be my legacy." The way he said legacy, like it was a joke, like Samuel's entire career was something to mock. Samuel's jaw tightened. You could see him taking a breath, composing himself. This was a man who had been in the industry for decades, who had earned his place, who had fought for every opportunity. And here was a late-night host, sitting across from him, dismissing it all like it was nothing. "You know what, Seth," Samuel said, "I actually do think about my legacy every single day. And I'm proud of the work I've done. All of it. From the biggest blockbusters to the smallest independent films. Because I brought something to each of those roles. I gave them everything I had." Seth was still smiling. That same smug smile. Like he thought he was winning some kind of game. Okay. Don't get defensive," Seth said. "I'm just saying, at your age, maybe it's time to be a little more selective. Quality over quantity, you know? At your age. Those 3 words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to go off. Samuel stared at Seth. Really stared at him. The kind of look that could cut through steel. The audience was shifting in their seats now. People were looking at each other, wondering if this was planned, wondering if this was some kind of bit. But it wasn't. This was real. This was a host who had completely lost the plot. At my age, Samuel repeated slowly. What exactly are you trying to say, Seth? Seth realized too late that he had crossed a line. You could see it on his face, that moment of panic. But instead of backing down, instead of apologizing, he doubled down. Look, I'm just being honest here, Seth said. You're not a young guy anymore. Maybe it's time to think about retirement. Go out on a high note. Enjoy your success. Let the younger actors have their moment. The audience gasped. Actually gasped. A few people even booed. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was uncomfortable. This was wrong. Samuel stood up. Not quickly. Not in a rush. But deliberately. Purposefully. He straightened his jacket, looked directly at Seth, and spoke in that calm, measured voice that somehow carried more weight than any shout ever could. Seth, Samuel said, I came here tonight to talk about a film I care about, a project that means something to me. And instead, you've spent the last few minutes disrespecting my career, my choices, and my age. I don't know what kind of interview you thought this was going to be, but I'm not going to sit here and let you talk to me like that. Seth tried to laugh it off. Come on, Samuel. Don't be so sensitive. I'm just joking around. This is late night television. We have fun here. But Samuel wasn't laughing. Neither was the audience. Fun? Samuel said. You think insulting your guests is fun? You think making someone feel small is entertainment? That's not fun, Seth. That's just mean. Seth's smile was completely gone now. He looked panicked. His producers were probably screaming in his earpiece. This was spiraling out of control, and everyone knew it. Samuel, listen. Seth tried again. I didn't mean anything by it. I was just trying to have a conversation. A conversation, Samuel repeated. Is that what you call this? Because from where I'm standing, this feels like you brought me on your show, just to tear me down. And I don't need that. I don't need you. And I certainly don't need to sit here and be disrespected on national television. The audience started clapping. Slowly at first, then louder. They were clapping for Samuel, supporting him, because everyone in that room knew he was right. Seth tried to regain control. Okay, let's just take a breath here. We can talk about the movie. That's what you came here for, right? Let's refocus. But it was too late. The damage was done. No, Seth, Samuel said firmly. We're done here. I came here in good faith. I came here to share something I care about with your audience. And you turned it into a joke. You made it about my age, about my choices, about things that have nothing to do with why I'm here. That's on you. Seth was scrambling now. You could see it. He was trying to find the words to fix this, to salvage the interview. But there was nothing he could say. Nothing that would undo what he had already done. Samuel, please, Seth said. Let's just, can we start over? Can we reset? Samuel shook his head. You don't get to reset, Seth. That's not how this works. You said what you said. You showed me exactly who you are, and I'm choosing not to be a part of it anymore. The audience was on Samuel's side completely now. People were standing up, clapping harder. Some were even cheering. This was a moment, a real moment, not scripted, not planned, just raw and real and honest. Seth looked at his desk, at his notes, at anywhere but Samuel. He was lost, completely out of his depth. This wasn't how these interviews were supposed to go. Guests were supposed to play along, laugh at the jokes, promote their projects, and leave. But Samuel wasn't playing that game. "I want to say something to your audience," Samuel said, turning away from Seth and looking directly at the crowd. "You all deserve better than this. You deserve hosts who respect their guests, who ask real questions, who create conversations worth having. Don't settle for cheap shots and mean-spirited humor. Demand better." The applause was thunderous now. People were on their feet. This wasn't just about Samuel anymore. This was about something bigger. About respect. About integrity. About standing up when something isn't right. Seth tried one. Last time. "Samuel, I apologize. Really. I crossed a line. Can we talk about the movie? That's all I want to do now. Just talk about your film." Samuel looked at him. Really looked at him. And for a moment, it seemed like maybe he would sit back down. Maybe he would give Seth another chance. But then he shook his head. "You had your chance, Seth," Samuel said quietly. "You had multiple chances. Every time I tried to talk about the film, you redirected to something else, something negative, something designed to get a laugh at my expense. That's not an interview. That's not a conversation. That's just cruel." Seth's face was red now. Whether from embarrassment or frustration, it was hard to tell. Probably both. "I really didn't mean it that way," Seth said weakly. "That's the problem," Samuel replied. "You probably didn't. You probably thought you were being funny. You probably thought this was all harmless. But it's not harmless, Seth. Words matter. How you treat people matters. And right now, you're showing everyone watching that you don't understand that." The studio was absolutely electric. This was unprecedented. Guests don't do this. They smile. They laugh. They play along no matter what. But Samuel wasn't like other guests. He had a backbone. He had principles. And he wasn't about to compromise them for a talk show appearance. "I'm going to leave now," Samuel announced. "Not because I'm angry. Not because I want to make a scene. But because I respect myself too much to stay in a situation where I'm not being respected." He started walking toward the stage exit. The band hadn't played. The producers hadn't cut to commercial. Everyone was frozen, watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Seth called out after him. "Samuel, wait, please. Can we just..." But Samuel didn't turn around, didn't stop, didn't give Seth the satisfaction of a response. He just kept walking, dignified, composed, head held high. The audience was going wild, cheering, clapping, supporting Samuel every step of the way. This was their moment too. They were witnesses to something real, something honest, something that would be talked about for years to come. As Samuel reached the edge of the stage, he paused, just for a second. He turned back, not to look at Seth, but to look at the audience one more time. "Thank you," he said simply. "Thank you for understanding." And then he was gone, disappeared backstage, left Seth sitting at his desk, speechless, struggling to figure out what to do next. The band finally started playing, trying to fill the awkward silence, trying to give Seth a moment to collect himself. But what could he say? What could anyone say after that? Seth looked into the camera. His face was a mixture of shock and regret and confusion. "We're going to take a quick break," he managed to say. His voice was shaky, uncertain. "We'll be right back." But the damage was done. The interview was over, and everyone knew it. In the commercial break, you could only imagine what was happening backstage. Producers scrambling, publicists making calls. Samuel probably in his dressing room, collecting his things, ready to leave the building entirely. And Seth, sitting at his desk, probably being told by everyone around him that he had messed up. Badly. When the show came back from commercial, Seth was alone at his desk. No guest, no explanation. Just him and the audience, and the weight of what had just happened. "So," Seth said with a forced laugh, That was unexpected. A few nervous chuckles from the audience, but mostly silence. They were still processing, still trying to understand what they had just witnessed. "Look," Seth continued, "I think I may have pushed a little too hard there. Sometimes I try to be funny, and it doesn't land the way I intend. If Samuel is watching, I really am sorry. I have nothing but respect for him and his work." It sounded hollow, because it was. This wasn't a real apology. This was damage control. This was a host trying to save face on live television. But the audience knew better. They had seen what happened. They had heard the words. They had watched Samuel stand up for himself. Seth moved on quickly after that, brought out his next guest, tried to pretend like everything was normal. But it wasn't. The energy in the room had shifted. The audience was different now. They had seen behind the curtain. They had seen what happens when a host forgets that his guests are real people with real feelings and real careers that deserve respect. Throughout the rest of the show, Seth seemed off. His jokes fell flat. His interviews felt forced. He kept glancing at the empty chair where Samuel had been sitting, as if he couldn't quite believe what had transpired. The band tried to keep things upbeat. The other guests tried to be entertaining. But everyone in that studio knew that the real story of the night had already happened. Everything else was just filler. What made this moment so powerful wasn't just that Samuel walked off. Guests have walked off talk shows before, but usually it's dramatic. Lots of yelling, throwing things, making a big theatrical exit. That's not what Samuel did. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He didn't throw anything or make a scene. He simply stood up, stated his position clearly and calmly, and left. That composure, that dignity, that's what made it so impactful. He proved that you don't have to lose your cool to stand up for yourself. You don't have to match someone else's negativity. You can be firm and clear and principled without becoming the villain in your own story. Seth, on the other hand, showed exactly what not to do as a host. He let his ego get in the way. He went for cheap laughs at his guests' expense. He confused mean-spirited jabs with actual humor. And when called out on it, he didn't take real responsibility. He made excuses. He tried to downplay it. He acted like Samuel was being too sensitive instead of recognizing that he had genuinely crossed multiple lines. The thing about talk show interviews is they're supposed to be collaborative. The host and the guest work together to create something entertaining and informative. It's not about the host dominating the conversation or putting the guest in their place. It's about facilitating a dialogue that serves both parties and, most importantly, serves the audience. Seth forgot that. He made the interview about himself, about getting laughs, about pushing buttons. He forgot that Samuel was there for a reason, that Samuel had a film to promote, that Samuel deserved the same respect and courtesy that any guest deserves. And Samuel reminded him, not with anger or aggression, but with clarity and conviction. He reminded Seth and everyone watching that respect isn't optional, that dignity matters, that standing up for yourself isn't about causing drama. It's about maintaining your self-worth. The way Samuel handled Seth's comments about his age was particularly powerful. Ageism in Hollywood is real. Actors face it constantly. The pressure to retire, to step aside, to make room for younger talent. But Samuel had earned his place. He had decades of incredible work behind him. He was still doing amazing films, still bringing depth and power to every role. For Seth to suggest that he should retire, that he should fade away, that was insulting on every level. And Samuel didn't let it slide. He could have laughed it off. He could have made a joke. He could have deflected, but he didn't. He addressed it head on. He made it clear that those comments were unacceptable, that his age didn't diminish his value as an actor or as a person, that he would continue working as long as he wanted to, and no talk show host was going to tell him otherwise. When Samuel spoke directly to the audience, that was another powerful moment. He took control of the narrative. He didn't let Seth frame the situation. He didn't let Seth play the victim or make excuses. He went straight to the people and told them what was happening. He empowered them to see through the facade of late-night television and demand better. The audience's reaction throughout all of this was telling. They weren't on Seth's side. They weren't laughing at his jokes about Samuel. They were with Samuel from start to finish. They recognized authenticity when they saw it. They recognized integrity, and they rewarded it with their support. Seth's attempts to apologize fell flat because they weren't genuine. He wasn't sorry for what he said. He was sorry that Samuel called him out. He was sorry that it made him look bad. He was sorry that it disrupted his show. But he wasn't actually sorry for the disrespect. If he was, he would have stopped after the first time Samuel pushed back. But he didn't. He kept going. He kept making jokes. He kept dismissing Samuel's concerns. Only when Samuel actually stood up to leave did Seth realize he had gone too far. That's not real remorse. That's just fear of consequences. Samuel's exit was clean. No dramatics, no door slamming, no final cutting remark. Just a simple thank you to the audience and a walk off stage. That restraint, that class, that's what separated him from Seth in that moment. He could have burned bridges. He could have said things he couldn't take back. But he didn't. He maintained his dignity even in the face of disrespect. The rest of the show after Samuel left was awkward. Seth tried to recover, tried to move on like nothing happened, but you can't unring that bell. The audience had seen what they had seen. They knew what had transpired, and no amount of jokes or musical performances or other celebrity interviews could erase that. This wasn't just a bad interview. This was a masterclass in how power dynamics work in entertainment. Seth had the home court advantage. He had the desk, the microphone, the audience, the cameras. Everything was set up to put him in a position of power. But Samuel had something more important. He had self-respect. He had boundaries. And he was willing to enforce them regardless of the setting. Too often in the entertainment industry, people stay quiet. They tolerate disrespect because they don't want to make waves. They don't want to be labeled as difficult. They don't want to hurt their career prospects. But Samuel showed that sometimes making waves is necessary. Sometimes being difficult, or what others might perceive as difficult, is actually just being principled. He didn't owe Seth his time. He didn't owe Seth his tolerance. He didn't owe Seth anything once Seth chose to be disrespectful. And he made that clear. Not with anger, but with action. He simply removed himself from the situation. That's power. That's control. That's what it looks like when someone truly respects themselves. For everyone watching, whether in the studio or at home, this was a reminder. A reminder that you don't have to accept poor treatment. You don't have to laugh along when someone is being cruel. You don't have to stay in situations that demean you, no matter how public they are or how awkward leaving might be. Samuel L. Jackson, a man who has been in countless interviews, who has promoted hundreds of projects, who knows the game better than almost anyone, chose to walk away. Not because he couldn't handle criticism, not because he was being overly sensitive, but because he recognized that what was happening wasn't okay. And he had the courage to say so, and the strength to follow through. That's the real story here. Not that a talk show interview went wrong, but that a legendary actor stood up for himself, and, in doing so, stood up for everyone who has ever been disrespected, dismissed, or demeaned in a professional setting. He showed that it's possible to maintain your dignity, to set boundaries, to walk away when necessary, and to do it all without losing yourself in the process. Seth Meyers learned a hard lesson that night, or at least he should have. The lesson that being a good host isn't about getting laughs at any cost. It's about creating a space where guests feel comfortable, respected, and valued. It's about facilitating conversations that enlighten and entertain without tearing people down. It's about understanding that the people sitting across from you are more than just content for your show. They're human beings with feelings and careers and dignity that deserve to be honored. Whether Seth actually learned that lesson is unclear, but Samuel didn't need him to learn it. Samuel already knew his worth. He already understood his value. He already had the self-respect necessary to stand up and walk away. And that's what made this moment so powerful. It wasn't about changing Seth. It was about Samuel refusing to compromise who he was for anyone. The interview that was supposed to be a simple promotional appearance became something much more significant. It became a statement, a line in the sand, a moment that people would remember and reference and learn from, not because of anything Seth did, but because of how Samuel responded to what Seth did. In the end, Samuel walked out of that studio with his head high and his dignity intact. And that's a victory. Not over Seth, but for himself. A victory for self-respect, for boundaries, for knowing when to say enough is enough and having the courage to mean it.